Florian Marquardt obtained his PhD at the University of Basel in Switzerland in 2002. He did 2 postdocs at the Swiss National Center for Competence in Research and Nanoscale Science in Basel and at Yale University. In 2005, he became a junior group leader at LMU in Munich in Germany. In 2010, he got a position as full professor at FAU in Erlangen in Germany. Since 2016, he has been a scientific director at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Light in Erlangen, while being a part-time professor at the university. He has been awarded with prizes and fellowships such as the Aminuta Group Leader Fellowship in 2007 and the Walter Schottky Prize for groundbreaking work on the theory of optomechanical systems in 2009. Okay, so thanks for joining us for the interview. We were wondering, have you ever considered doing something different from physics?
Okay, when I was a high school student, I basically was most interested in mathematics, actually. Mm-hmm. And also I did some programming as a teenager, which later came in handy, of course, for the stuff I'm doing now. But then I guess I was in a math competition and I made it to the final, but not quite to the prize. So I decided, let's do theoretical physics instead. So yeah, this was my path to physics.
So this interview series is kind of here to demystify what is the job of a researcher. Mm-hmm. So could you maybe share the key steps that you took in your career that brought you to where you currently are?
Well, first I was a diligent student, I guess. But then, okay, the most important part is that, so I started working on superconductivity as a diploma student back in Bayreuth, which is a small university in Germany, simply because I found the professor was the most competent and demanding one. And then I had gotten to know some professor who then moved to Basel, Switzerland, and he offered me a PhD position. There I got involved in what I thought was a very foundational project with a so-called quantum zero-point fluctuations. And then I moved on to Yale to do a postdoc, where I got involved in a topic that would occupy me for quite some time afterwards, which was how does light couple to mechanical motion. Mm-hmm. And I liked it very much because at the time this seemed like a very exotic niche, so that not many people were working on it. Mm-hmm. And then for some reason or other it exploded in the years to come. And then later I was leading a junior group in Munich actually, and got a call for a professorship in Erlangen where I am now, and then became Max Planck director there. But so the most important lesson I have is you cannot really plan ahead, but you can always try to give your best. That's the lesson I have.
So you would say that the career path includes a lot of challenges, but also a lot of rewards. What maybe are the biggest challenges, but also the most rewarding aspects of this career path?
Well, as a challenge, as a young student, well, maybe you did well in class, but you don't yet understand at all what is really involved in actual research. Also, you have no overview of what are really modern topics, what are questions where even the experts right now are a little bit uncertain and which one should focus on because there's still a lot to be done. So you have no clue about these as a young student. So it's very likely that initially you will be frustrated. Of course, with time that changes as you gather experience. So for me, it certainly also was a challenge personally. I was a rather shy student, so I would not necessarily easily approach other people, even though it could have helped me a lot to get opinions on what's an interesting topic right now and where should I actually go and apply for a PhD position or anything. So these were challenges that I found, yes. Yeah. And then you asked about rewards also, yeah. Well, so the reward is when you for the first time understand something for yourself, so to speak. The second most rewarding aspect is if you talk to very smart young people who are also eager to learn something and who bring in ideas of their own. So that's what I would consider rewarding.
Today we're talking a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. How did you first become interested in applying these tools to your own research?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Back in 2015, I went to a lecture in a very interesting lecture series that is organized in Erlangen at the interface between science and humanities. And in this lecture series, there was a medical doctor actually who was looking into brain development, and he was talking about brain development, and he was mentioning just briefly that there was this deep learning revolution going on. And so I got very excited about this because I had this previous interest and read up about it, and then started to program little neural networks myself. And so then that's how it started for me personally. But then the following year, I got an extremely talented master student and then eventually PhD student who helped me to set up this direction and to did some research into what are the technical aspects that you need to master, which programming language would you choose, and all this kind of stuff.
So speaking of artificial intelligence, could you maybe explain it in terms understandable for undergrad students? For example, what can I think of a neural network? What is it physically, and how do I train it?
So in general, the main aspect behind machine learning is that you, as you already mentioned, you brought up the keyword training. So instead of programming an algorithm and hard coding it, you want to have something that you can train on lots of experiences, and it will become better from these, from observing these experiences, from observing the training data. So that's the underlying principle. So nowadays, an artificial neural network as it is used nowadays just consists of many units, which are much, much simpler than biological cells. So a biological cell is, of course, fantastically complex. But in an artificial neural network, each unit at any given time only holds a single number, which, if it is bigger, means the unit, the neuron, is activated more strongly. And if it's smaller, then the neuron is not activated. And then there's a very simple algorithm. Usually they are arranged in layers, and there's a very simple algorithm to compute the neuron activations in one layer from the neuron activations in the layer below. So there's a very simple mathematical formula to go from here to there, and then in layer by layer fashion you go from the so-called input layer, where you put in the input signal like a representation of an image, to go from there to an output layer where you really learn say what is the meaning of the image. If neuron 1 is activated, maybe it's a dog. If neuron 2 is activated, maybe it's a cat. And the part that can be trained is really the connection strengths between the different neurons. And then there's extremely efficient algorithms that can update these connection strengths based on all the training data that you are looking at.
Okay, thank you. How do you use AI as a tool, for example, to design quantum technologies, as you were talking today?
Well, quantum technologies is a very wide field in itself. So it includes quantum computers and quantum simulators and other quantum devices, for example, for sensing. But in all these approaches, these are relatively complex engineered systems, you could say. There's this engineering aspect and this design aspect. And so you can already guess that machine learning can help to design them better in a general way. Also, typically the way these are used, especially for quantum computers, is you are running a kind of program, which means you're doing operations on these quantum components as a function of time. So obviously there will be very complex strategies, complex sequences of operations. And so it's quite natural then to ask whether machine learning can help us to optimize these complex sequences. Mm-hmm. So lots of optimization problems, finding strategies, also lots of problems where you want to use the pattern matching abilities of neural networks. So these are a few examples of how you can use machine learning for these devices.
So one of the examples you were mentioning today in your talk was quantum error correction. So how do you tell a machine to come up with or to design an error correction scheme, and why is it important to minimize errors in the context of quantum computation?
Okay, yeah, so in quantum computing, you want to operate on many quantum two-level systems, many quantum bits, and execute a sequence of operations so that you get the answer to some question that would be extremely hard to answer classically. Like, for example, I give you a large number. How does it factorize into different factors? But the way these quantum algorithms are invented is they are invented under the assumption that everything is perfect, that every operation is performed perfectly, and there is no external influence. Now, in reality, of course, these quantum bits are real physical systems. They will be subject to noise. Maybe there's an electric field fluctuating in the vicinity. There's a magnetic field that is not quite controlled. And so because of this, in principle, the quantum information would decay over time and relatively quickly if you don't design these systems very well. The idea is to not use only a single physical qubit, but use multiple physical qubits. And instead of having a very simple superposition state in the single qubit, you have a very complicated looking so-called entangled state in multiple qubits. Now that sounds even more fragile than what happens in the single physical qubit, and in principle it is. So in principle this seems the wrong direction, but if you do the right sequence of gates, of operations, and then also you measure it in the right way, you're able to recognize now for the first time whether an error has happened or not. And so that's the principle of quantum error correction. But since this is so complex and you would have to repeat it for every new platform, maybe this is a good place where machine learning can come in. And so that's really what we did. So we tell the computer, please find for us a good quantum error correction scheme. And the way we do this is we use a technique that's called reinforcement learning. That's different from the standard supervised learning. So supervised learning would be, I already know the good strategy and I'm just trying to teach a neural network to repeat this good strategy. But of course we don't know the good strategy. So we need something else. So we need some technique like reinforcement learning where the neural network just tries out random stuff at first, then we give it a reward that depends in this case on how well it does preserve the quantum information. And so then it goes through the same sequence again, does another random attempt, and eventually it will become better and better. So there are certain techniques how to update the neural network so that it goes in the direction of increasing rewards, and eventually it will become quite good and have, so to speak, invented or discovered a strategy that for this particular hardware platform works really well in order to preserve the quantum coherence, so to do quantum error correction. So that's the principle.
You already mentioned that with AI, where AI can come up with schemes that no human could come up with, do we have to change a bit the way that we think of science and our role as scientists in it?
Okay, so first I have to clarify, certainly for anything that a computer can come up with, eventually a human would in principle also be able to come up with it because there's no principal magic involved. Do we have to rethink things? Well, at the moment, at least, I wish that a larger community also of experimentalists knows about these tools and knows that they are in principle available and starts to apply them and explore in their particular settings whether they can be helpful or not. And so we will learn many things in this direction. And eventually this will then, at least on this lower level, it will enable a lot of interesting, let's say, automation. And so suddenly that will enable very different progress in science because at least parts will be completely automatized. And that is a little bit like what must have happened when numerics as such was introduced, say, in the 60s and 70s. Suddenly problems that previously you just had to give up were suddenly solvable by numerical methods. So that already will introduce, say, qualitative changes. But we can also try to look further ahead. Yeah? In the future, it would be really good, but it's a hard way to get there, that the computer itself would have learned about the literature, about the existing solutions, and would itself be able to highlight, look, I went through all of these solutions, and solution number 17, actually, I have never seen anything similar in the literature, but we're still quite some way removed from that.
How important do you think is that researchers participate in outreach? Like, do we have some kind of responsibility to society?
Okay, yeah, I myself certainly believe so. So I'm at my university in Erlangen, I'm for 12 years already organizing the Saturday morning lecture series, where colleagues just give talks on a level accessible to the lay audience about current research, and I think it's very well received. So yes, absolutely. So if we don't do it, then who else should do it?
And now the final question. What advice would you give to a physics student that is hoping to pursue a research career?
First, you should, as I said in the beginning, you should be aware things will be a little bit random. Things also can be a little bit frustrating. That's in the nature of science, that most of the time you get stuck, so to speak, because when you're not stuck and when things work, you can proceed very quickly until you get to the next wall, and then you're stuck again. So you will be stuck for quite a long time. So the fraction of the time where you are stuck is quite extensive. Then there's also very many smart people from whom to learn. That's a good aspect. And then you should definitely make sure that you have fun in what you're doing. And a good advice there is to, if you think things are too complicated, go 1 or 2 steps back, find a little toy model, find the simplest possible model that you could attack.
Yeah, some really good advice. So thank you very much for the interview.
Sure, yes.